and Mr. Sharu. So, Dr. Sharu. Dr. Sharu. So, audiences are reminded to please keep their voices or their cheerings and cheerings silent to a minimum. Please keep your phone on silent and also only leave or enter the hall in between speeches and not during speeches itself. So, on opening government, we have Mara Hannakiri. On opening opposition, we have work hard, play hard. On closing government, we have Cambridge Mara Sandrian Berhad. And on closing opposition, we have Mara Potaho. So, on the motion, this House will abolish all private, vernacular, religious, and gender-based schools in favor of a homogeneous public schooling system. Can we please put a round of applause to invite the Prime Minister to begin the speech?
Ladies and gentlemen, we on Mara Hannakiri today believe that Malaysia is an extremely unique country with different races and different beliefs that our people hold. So today we believe that the debate today will be within the context of Malaysia itself. Let's look at the problem here. We understand that under status quo that there are three separations of individuals we have right now. Firstly, it's a separation of classes. This means that you have a separation between the rich individuals, as well as the rich individuals, the rich families goes to private schools, and everybody else who are deemed less privileged, who goes to public institutions that we provide for them today. The second separation we think is a problem is that the separation of races, where we can see that some Malays and Indians go to Chinese schools, whereas the majority of Chinese students goes to Chinese schools. Similarly, with Tamil schools, where most primarily they're only Indian students. The third separation that we think that could be a problem is that the separation of religious groups that you have with concerning races. For example, Muslims or those individuals who are Malays go to Islamic schools, whereas and also the separation of gender, where you see boys and girls are separated and they go to different schools. Why is this a problem? We think that in context like Malaysia that we have today, what we need is a more unity and more understanding, ladies and gentlemen. We are separated and we live in our own bubbles from cradle to grave. We think that is a massive problem. The mechanism from side OG will be simple. Number one, we will set up a homogeneous public schools where everybody goes to this specific school. Number two, all our methods of distributing students within an area will be the same. This means that we will still consider the students' geographical proximity, as well as we consider the diversity and balance that we could achieve under our site. Thirdly, concerning vernacular and religious schools, we'll convert all the schools to a homogeneous schooling system. This means that things like private schools as well, we think that state will offer to purchase these schools if it is necessary, when it is necessary, and we also offer settlements if we can afford to. But we think that can be negotiated at the end of the day. Fourthly, we think that syllabus will be taught in a very homogeneous system, right? We believe that it can be taught in a single language. We hope it will be English, but even if it's in Malay language, we think it's fine. However, we also provide elective schooling system where we think that it's very okay for us to offer Chinese studies, for example, or also Islamic studies, as well as Bible studies if we have to. We think that's very okay. So the debate today, the purpose of this debate today, we think will be about us achieving more unity. Thank you. Argument number one, private schools. Right. The first level we have to raise is that we understand that rich people mostly go to private schools, and whereas compared to middle income as well as low income families, they go to public schools. Recently, some middle income families have been taking up loans because they have no faith in public schooling system do not deny this. The conclusion to that is that there will be an endless cycle where more privileged groups will leave public schooling system because they don't believe in the system we have right now. Second level is that the harms that you could come because of this. The first level I have is that now more privileged people or more privileged groups will have a larger political voice to be able to push for more policy changes, for them to influence the policy changes that will occur within the system today. We think that the more money they have the more power for them to be able to lobby governments at the end of the day. We think that if it's not because of this system, poor people cannot achieve improvement in public schools like how these rich people deem they have to be. Second analysis is that if rich people have interest in improving public schooling system, we think that it will be a collective benefit that could come under our side. We think that number one, they will be able to lobby for better schools because these rich individuals, these rich families also, they also want the best for their child. We think that will be better when they collectively try to improve schooling system because it will also be benefit not only the rich families but also the less privileged as well. This means that you make individuals with smaller voices to also receive the benefits. The third level is that in schools it is very important for us to have a mix of classes. Why? Number one, because we don't want to create bubbles, right? We think that with the existence of bubbles, rich people won't be able to confront poverty or they won't be able to deal with people who they deem who are less underprivileged, right? We think that now that these rich students will be able to have a conversation with them because they don't understand that people have different concerns. Therefore, these rich individuals will grow up in bubbles that shapes the view of themselves. Before second level NQIs.
Ma'am, what is good or better for your schooling system is inherently subjective. Some people believe that English is better as a medium of communication.
True.
Some people believe that Chinese is better as a medium of communication. How do you deal with the many different levels of criteria in society?
Well, we can come up to that once we achieve a unified schooling system first. That's why we say the second level to this to answer Jasmine's POI was that now rich people are more likely to say the bubble that you create because of Jasmine's POI is that now poor people are more likely to be deemed as lazy and rich people will think that they are rich, they deserve to go to privileged schools just because they have money in their pockets, which we think is very untrue. We think that when you live in a privileged bubble, it means that you have a wider implication on Malaysia as a whole. We're talking about urban rich individuals who never mix with urban poor people because they don't think urban people deserve to mix with them. This is also because privileged classes will end up become politicians and they won't ever listen to these underprivileged people because they don't think that underprivileged people really matter. Therefore, the division of concerns by classes in national levels will further continue because you don't have a unified system. You don't have a unified individuals in your country. The conclusion to this is that it's also a racial implications whereby there are these are the kinds of people who use arguments like parties like DAP that they will control and that they don't care about urban Malay folks. Obviously, we don't want this to happen. There's a racial aspect to that, and this is why we think private schools need to be abolished. Thank you.
All right, thank the Prime Minister for her speech. Can I now please invite the Leader of Opposition? Here.
We also believe that we don't want segregation to happen within schools. We believe that we don't want the rich and the poor to be segregated. But opening government has been very dismissive of how the individuals will react within these scenarios, how segregation, how integration will necessarily happen. They only told us how segregation is happening within status quo, not necessarily telling us how these individuals within homogeneous or interactions within homogeneous systems will necessarily happen, right? In my speech, I will tell you why the learning experience for all these individuals within homogeneous systems will be severely affected in a negative way, and I'll tell you why parental choice within choosing the education for these individuals, for these children is very important. But before that, a few contentions with opening government. They told us that this separation, um, they told us that this separation is beneficial for a voice for a voice for the poor individuals for within school systems, right? When you create a integrated homogeneous system, you integrate rich individuals with poor individuals, and they have more of a lobby power. And segregation doesn't necessarily happen because you have better education, right? Let's really look at what these individuals will lobby for in the first place. These individuals will lobby for things that their children want, right? That they are suited to. So if you say that the lobby power is now focused within an institution and the poor people are within the institution, it won't necessarily benefit this poor people because now your lobby power is dominated by the rich individuals, right? For you to tell us that this lobby power by the rich individuals will benefit the poor individuals is not necessarily true for the very fact that the lobby power is centered around what the children of these rich individuals necessarily want, right? Things like better uniforms, things like improved education or suitable education for rich individuals to progress, right? Not education that is suited for that is suited for poor individuals, right? We have to recognize that there is a certain uh, there is a certain segregation in form of capacity of poor individuals and rich individuals. We think that within what you're doing is you're only fostering for lobby power for the rich individuals, right? The things they want, right? Things like IGCSE, things like better clothing, right? This won't necessarily benefit what the poor people really need, right? That's suitable types of education that will help them, that will make them understand in a way that rich individuals already have, right? So we don't think that there is a form of help that we can propose. That there is a form of help that we can propose to these individuals. So what you end up doing is that there is more segregation within your policy, right? Because the policies that you lobby for don't necessarily benefit the poor individuals within that homogeneous system, right? But in my speech, I'm talking about more than poor individuals, rich individuals, and what the debate actually explains. Before that, sure.
Can you tell us what educational experience that the poor cannot appreciate or cannot benefit from? Because it literally sounds really offensive when you say poor people don't have the capacity to understand things that the rich people can.
We don't think that they are incapable of doing so. It's just that they don't have a proper understanding as rich people do, right? They can have that understanding, but they have to go a process in which they have to go through a process in which they get to that point, right? Once you mix education for different levels or different systems of education to different levels of understanding, we don't think that these individuals can necessarily these poor individuals can necessarily adapt to these types of systems because they necessarily can't, right? They have a process in which they do so. Yes, we do concede that on a certain level that rich individuals will benefit more, but we are taking a step we're taking a step into a new process in which poor individuals will understand more in a system where they can understand more, they can reach the level that rich individuals did, right? So let's move on to my semester game. Why parental choice is very important. We think the parents have the ultimate autonomy over their child within status quo, right? So they will choose all the types of education they want for them. But what you're doing is now parents have no other option, right? So parents who choose vernacular systems, parents who choose private education for their children have no option, but and they are forced to put these individuals within homogeneous systems, right? This leads to two things. Firstly, parents may pull their child out of that school system because they believe that that system is not necessarily suited for them, because they have that autonomy, because they believe that that system is not suited for their child. They may pull their child out of the system, right? But let's look at a scenario, secondly, where they are forced to put these individuals within this homogeneous system because it's the only option. They are most likely to tell the child to ignore or push out people within that school, right? Because they have certain reasons to why they didn't want these individuals to why they didn't want their children to be in that school in the first place. One of those reasons is because they call it the system of that school, right? Or the individuals, or because the individuals within that school. So if my parent sends me to a Tamil school and is now forced me has now been forced by the government for me to join a homogeneous system, and my parents don't necessarily think of other races the same way. We don't think that they will send their children simply to integrate. Right? They will tell their children to push these people out in school, and we think that integration won't necessarily happen when under your side, even when you force it. Right? Only segregation will happen because these parents will dictate how their children will act within the school. So but also let's look at what happens when you force this learning experience upon them, right? When parents are forced to put this learning experience upon them, this does two things. Their learning experience doesn't necessarily has a full understanding, right? Because of two main reasons. Firstly, they weren't exposed to these homogeneous systems in the first place. So their level of understanding of these homogeneous systems is less than when they were in that certain specific school, right? So if I was in a Tamil school and I have been exposed to other forms of education like English and maths, I don't necessarily have a form of understanding and learning experience for me to feel comfortable, right? But secondly, I am not. But secondly, I am not. Even if parents feel that it's not because of even if parents feel that it's not because of me doing it's not because of me doing bad in my education, they will blame the individuals of the system of that school for me doing bad in my education, right? For me getting a bad learning experience. So parents ultimately are implicit within the segregation of these individuals. For all those reasons, we propose that you only foster segregation, not integration.
I thank the leader of opposition for his speech. Can I please invite the Deputy Prime Minister?
Here.
When a parent's right to pick an form of education for a child leads to religious education that typically leads to bigotry in society, vernacular schools that lead to racism and perpetuating that racism, private schools that perpetuate classist attitudes and insensitivity towards the poor, and gendered schools that perpetuate hyper-masculinity, patriarchy, as well as gender discrimination, we feel it's illegitimate for you to pick forms of education that fundamentally harm not only your child, but harm society in general. It is an illegitimate choice. We are happy to nationalize all these schools. A few things I'm going to respond to, because I do think that the opening opposition have some legitimate concerns. Although I will first point out that my POI still stands. I feel that it's offensive to say that poor people cannot fundamentally understand things that rich people lobby to. Fine, maybe they lobby for lacrosse, polo, or maybe even art classes, ladies and gentlemen. These things even poor people don't get access to currently because poor people just don't have the lobbying power and attention from the state in order to get access to. Some might say those things are access points to social mobility that they haven't had access to in the long run, ladies and gentlemen, that they fundamentally are blocked out on that side of the house. Three things I want to engage with. Firstly, different levels of understanding. Secondly, will parents pull out? And thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, will there be pushback from individuals in society? Firstly, different levels of understanding. Firstly, I think this is a mechanistic issue. Surely we will implement this by stages. Maybe when the next generation of standard 1 people will come in, we will kind of implement this. We will put in like four people, throw them inside and like kind of hajama people. We're not even doing the PT3 thing here, right? The second thing, ladies and gentlemen, clearly we segregate individuals based on their levels of understanding already. That's why we have the grade system, standard 1, standard 2, or even sometimes hold people back to ensure people understand deeply, ladies and gentlemen. Thirdly, we have special classes to ensure sure that people who are held back have after school classes and things like that. Anyway, these are all mechanistic mitigatory systems that we can already do. That's not a structural concern on that side of the house. We have many benchmarks. Currently, we're trying to reform Malaysian education system to not just assess grades, as well as the things that you do. Currently, we're trying to reassess that in terms of the different capabilities that you have moving forward. Believe me, I was just at the Ministry of Education. Maybe the people in Pemandu know more about this, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that that's kind of the way that we're heading towards. Anyway, that is an assessment of whether we're reforming our ability to assess ability rather than grades, rather than people who have fundamentally different levels of understanding. The comparative, ladies and gentlemen, is that surely these people will be lobbying for things other than your polo classes or art classes, things like cleaner bathrooms, for instance, more funding in your PTA sessions, or more attention in your PTA sessions to improve the skills of teachers, to have more skilled teachers when it comes to teaching English because their kids are not fundamentally happy with teaching math or science better, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that some of these people, parents that come from poor families, don't know how to lobby sometimes, or don't know who to go to, whereas rich families more likely do, is a comparative difference as to why there's probably more improvement under our side of the house, given that most of the things you want to improve are generally acceptable and generally used for by everyone in study. Even its better sports equipment, ladies and gentlemen, at least poor people will be able to benefit from that and not feel like they are using scraps that the state throws at them, feel worthless about themselves, and not come to school. That's why poor people oftentimes don't engage in state apparatuses, because they feel like they're being thrown scraps by the state and not actually having a proper education at the end of the day. We fundamentally changed that, at least under our side, to a non-classist system under our side of the house. We're done with that issue. Secondly, will parents pull out? We think this is a really unreasonable context. Parents will still want their kids to have an education, and not all parents will be able to afford, even if you're rich. We're not talking about super rich. Okay, maybe super rich people will be able to send their kids to Australia. But just kind of rich people can't send their kids to school. It costs a lot of money. Fundamentally, they'll still want their kids to have an education. You can't tell me they'll suddenly turn into an Amish life and then not want their kid to have electricity or any sort of education whatsoever. We think they need to be a little bit more reasonable on that side of the house. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, will there be pushback? Yes, we agree there will be pushback. Let's take it at its worst case scenario. Let's assume this doomsday scenario where parents tell their kids, let's bully those Indian kids at school, or Chinese kids at school, or Malay kids at school. Let's look at the comparative in this debate. You will never have to look at a Malay face on that side of the house. You will never need to engage with an Indian person on that side of the house. Sure, maybe you'll be able to meet Indian people or Chinese people on the street. That's definitely sure. We're not going to say you're not going to ever see these people ever, ladies and gentlemen, but there's a comparative difference between building a personal interaction, growing up with these people, looking at these people as human, ladies and gentlemen, versus just seeing them as strangers on the street. We're also talking about children, which means that early developmental stages also changes their worldview as to what they think is normal around them, ladies and gentlemen. So if they see that only Indian people are around them, then they're going to grow up not wanting to subconsciously interact with other people who are not Indian, because that's how children are born and raised, ladies and gentlemen, in an environment where things are unfamiliar, are scary. And when you are an adult, you can't change it anymore because your worldview is cemented in that particular gap. That's why we need to do it here and now under that side of the house. Let's take it as worst case. Let's say there's pushback. In that scenario, it's comparatively better because there's the state as well as teachers to moderate that particular interaction and discussion, can moderate bullying and things like that. Those are mechanistic concerns. But at the very least, you are comparatively more likely to go to recess together. You are in the same classes together. You are going to do assignments and homework together, ladies and gentlemen. Probably going to strike up a conversation and finally see these people as human. That's why Hannah's argument was so important in this particular debate, because these people grow up in society, then later when they're adults, that's when you have classist attitudes like not being able to understand that these people are human too, and then more likely to say things like, oh, poor people, I kind of wanted a POI, but okay, never mind. Poor people are lazy, and I don't have a personal image in my mind or personal friend in mind to contrast those stereotypes to. The comparative here is this, ladies and gentlemen. Under your side, those classist or racist attitudes still happen as well. Things like when things on the news pop up when it comes to racist attitudes or things like that. When Perkasa comes up on the news and then you have a family discussion around the table. Word of mouth, between your family members. over the dinner table, your parents tell you these stereotypes over and over again throughout your life, and using these instantaneous examples to form your worldview. You don't have a friend at school to contrast that view with, ladies and gentlemen, in order to humanize and defeat that particular example. That's why it's comparatively worse on that side of the house. If you look at wholesale at the end of this opening half, ladies and gentlemen, the political implications of this policy are massive. It creates entire generations in the future who either never have to confront women and confront their patriarchal views, either bigotry, ladies and gentlemen, and the rising Islamism that's in Malaysia, whether it be the classist or racist attitudes that are typically associated with politics and what we view of each other. The reason Malaysia is so divided and so misunderstood, ladies and gentlemen, is because we don't understand each other and we're more deeply divided than ever before. I've never felt more, believe more, and actually stand for a motion more than this. Please propose.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his speech, and then now please invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the beautiful thing about choice and giving agency to people is that it makes them less adversarial and opposing towards positive changes within society. We think what side opening government in this debate missed is how parents respond to these kind of things and how parents isolate their children further from communities that they want them to integrate with to begin with. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of things. Right? I'm going to end with a comparative that Mifzal talked about at the end, right? So let's first talk about this political lobby, because side opening government thinks this is very important. If you get rich people into public schools, then they will lobby for better education. Two responses. Number one, governments already pander to the needs of individuals within public education because they form the majority of the voting base, ladies and gentlemen. There's no need to bring rich people into public schools to get that political lobby. Secondly, what Sean told you in his speech is that what rich people are likely to lobby for are things that makes their money worth, Mr. Speaker. So things like not having uniforms in school, things like having paid IGCSE sessions separate within those schools. Those are things worth lobbying for that makes the difference between the poor and the rich within the schools more apparent, which is far worse under their side, Madam Chair. We're not happy to stand for that. They'll exacerbate the gap even worse, right? But what did Sean talk to you about in his speech that wasn't engaged by opening government? He told you, A, that parents are likely to pull their children out because you don't give them the parental choice necessary. Their response to this is that, well, they have to go there anyways. The difference is, Madam Chair, these are likely to affect people who are within areas of poverty, where they're in the grey area on whether or not to send their children to school in the first place, or whether to keep them and work on farms, or things like that's helpful to the family business and SMEs, right? In those scenarios, they're likely to pull their children out because in those scenarios, they don't want their children to be in a system that is not religious, in a system that is not racial. And that system is far worse, Madam Chair, because the child does not get education. But the second scenario that could possibly happen is that the comparative, right, that Mifzal talked about, they are likely not to tell their children to not interact with these people. So let's look at the world we live in today. In the world we live in today, when parents send their children to gender-based schools, when parents send their children to religious schools, they have the perception in their mind that they have nothing to worry about because these are the people I want my child to interact with. Yes, it sounds bad at the start, but what is the world they live in? The world they live in is that when parents are forced to send their children to these particular schools, that's when they actually verbally tell their children, do not interact with these people because I don't want you to be friends with them. Do not be friends, do not make friends in this particular community, when otherwise they would not have said those things. And the child could have learned by his own how people are not different, and then he could have learned through adulthood and growing up that these are things that can be reconciled with, Madam Chair. That is a world that's far worse. Yes, right now, parents are kind of shallow-minded. Some parents are kind of shallow-minded, right? They don't want their child to interact with people for these discriminatory reasons, for unrealistic reasons to begin with. But the thing that we have to consider is whether or not taking that choice away from them will make things better or make things worse. We think it makes things far worse because you actually tell your child to not interact with them. But what makes it far worse, and Sean told you as well, is that often even if these children do badly in school, then parents will immediately assume that, oh, my child did badly in school because he was communicating with this particular group of people, because he was involved with this particular community, and that makes the process of integration far worse, because parents become more isolated in nature, sequestered from the rest of society, because they feel that this is bad influence. And that sort of parental influence on the child grows with them for a very long time, Mr. Speaker, because that's in part how important parental influence is on the child. So the next thing that we told you is that the reason, no thank you, the reason why there is problems with different levels of understanding is not, we're not trying to say that poor people are stupid, or that poor people, or people in poverty, or people in the middle class cannot empathize with the needs of the poor. That isn't what we're trying to say, Madam Chair. The reason why parental choice is important is because often for two reasons. Number one, the child already grew up in a system, in an environment that was religious based, that was gender based, that was racial based, right? And parents want them to be in that same environment because it's a comfortable learning experience. Or, Madam Chair, that they feel that particular children feel more comfortable learning in the presence of other girls, or in the presence of other guys, or in the presence of a religious community, or in the presence of a private school system, of a different education system altogether, like IGCSEs. Now, parents can learn these things from their children and communicate that to the government by sending them to these particular schools that makes their child learning comfortable. We're not saying they're bad or they're stupid. We're saying that this is the places where they learn most comfortably and can get the best results possible. And that is what is most important, right? Whether the child's education is functional to begin with. Because an educated person is more likely to be able to interact with the rest of the world, and more likely to be involved in discussions, more likely to be involved in debates, because their comfortable learning experience will lead them to be more integrated to begin with. So we're not saying, well, then they told us that their argument is that because of our policy, or because of status quo, poor people are told not to go to school, because apparently the education system is crappy. Now, this doesn't make sense, right? So people don't go to school because things like they want their child to stay home and work on particular things that the parents want them to work in, not because education is not as great as it could be, but education is there, Madam Chair. It's better than not having education to begin with. So we think that that world is far better. Yes.
If a Malay goes to an Islamic school, goes to UiTM, works for the Malay Civil Service, how will that change? Because Ibrahim Ali has a master's degree, but still his views haven't changed, and education hasn't stopped him from being a bigot.
So in this particular, obviously, we live in a world where there are people who don't escape from that particular path, right? Now, there are people who, like Ibrahim Ali, who will go down that same path of learning in a religious school or learning in a particular school, and then continuing in that same Utimara, for example, or going in. I'm sorry. The debaters are great in Utimara. Everyone else may have less empathy. I don't know. But yeah, there will be exceptions to the rule. I'm not saying everyone is great, but the likelihood is what the debate is about, right? What is most likely going to happen? Most likely what's going to happen is that these people are less able to access debates and discussions, and are more likely to be told by their parents to go in that particular route Ibrahim Ali took, to go in that route that makes them more sequestered from society, Madam Chair. The comparative is far worse. Their world is a world where when choice is taken away, people respond with adversary, people respond with aggression, and they don't want that same thing to be put upon their child. And when their child does badly, Madam Chair, that's when you see things like racial disharmony happening. That's when you see people blaming other individuals for things that were just not true to begin with. Because choice was taken away, because they were put in a position that previously they thought was not okay, and they thought their position was best. It makes it far worse for them. For all those reasons, we are very, very, very proud to oppose.
Alright, I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for his speech. Now to begin the closing half of the debate, can we please invite the Member of Government? Here. Okay?
Ladies and and gentlemen, it is true that debaters from Utimara are great, but we would say that the larger majority are regrettably afraid to engage in a world in which they don't have to defend immutable characteristics of their identity, ladies and gentlemen. We will argue that it makes for a better world if Utimara is open for everyone. Opening government in this debate spoke about the students right now and how do we best counteract the sort of bigotry that can that is cultivated within these systems of education. Closing government will enter this debate and talk about how we better the economic transformation that can push and propel Malaysia towards becoming better, like states like Singapore, like my friend is from over there. How do we deal with this debate? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to justify the interference by the state, the question that was asked by opposition. Secondly, I'm going to talk about why the existing systems of education creates an effective division a lot better than opening government. Thirdly, how do we make sure that Malaysia can economically catch up to the likes of developed countries, our neighbors beyond, ladies and gentlemen. But before that, several points of clarification. Number one, we think that we can get better funding right now at the point in which you abolish the system and allow for everyone to engage in a homogeneous public system, because by logic and by number, you get funding per head to the student that engages in that public system. Therefore, we will argue that there's already an incentive for parents to want to send their kids to school because obviously you love your kids and you want them to have education. Under closing government, we can support two things. Number one, we can support things like subsidies as well as better collaborations with institutions like Teach for Malaysia to ensure that we can have a better learning environment, ladies and gentlemen. We will support a policy in which there is a greater point of interaction, like what Mifzal said, where you go to the same homeroom, you go to the same canteen, where you run away from the same cikgu discipline waving the rotan around. But we think that we need to start saving students from pre-existing social divisions that traps and imprisons them, and it stems from a divisive system of environment, ladies and gentlemen. First, how do we justify interference by the state? It's very simple, because we're talking about children of the country right now. As a state, Malaysia already acknowledges the fact there is a higher degree of responsibility that exists, which we attach to children. We override parents and their ability to decide these things because the sort of responsibility that we give to parents is in trust, and we can remove that at the point which there is a larger objective good, ladies and gentlemen, dealing with the parent autonomy of opening opposition. We already do things like removing children at the point in which parents are abusive towards them. We already do things like enacting compulsory vaccination even if the parents doesn't like them, all at the expense of the parents' choice, especially because the benefits that parents hope to achieve are subjective in nature. Therefore, Jasmine was very right to say that methods of education and attaining benefit is subjective in nature, but the ability to integrate, to know a person, to understand one another is an objective benefit that we can achieve under our side of the house. On a comparative, we will prioritize the objective benefit of knowing one another as opposed to a subjective benefit of being comfortable about who you're sitting next to, because we don't think removing yourself from people that are great for you is something that is a good thing, ladies and gentlemen. Coming from UITM, I'm very proud to support that position. Secondly, let's look at the existing system of education and why we think it creates effective division. We would argue from closing government that the current system right now is a system of social and geographical eugenics. This is how you use it in Chris. Especially where schools are built in specific areas that are not targeted and spread out. We see better schools being built in areas like Mont Kiara, Damansara, as well as Shah Alam, versus in areas like Batam Bejuntai or other areas, because we see that the sort of development is concentrated onto these specific areas and therefore creates a division as to where people can go to because of where they come from. At the formative years, your conceptualization of your identity goes beyond into your adult life, as well as based on who you interact with, especially when where people are coming from creates things like predisposed bias as well as prejudices, but also how they are perceived as economic actors later when they are adults, ladies and gentlemen. Because oftentimes, affluent children will likely not want to interact with children from the lower income bracket. Religious children will be too scared to interact with individuals who are secular. What happens right now is that we imprison the rakyat and pigeonhole them and tell them, these are your roles in life right now and your roles in life later when you grow up.
because you feel a point of comfort right now, as well as what you are supposed to be and predispose attachments to how you are supposed to behave. So all of this powerful rhetoric that is utilized right now, like Malays are lazy, Indians are gangsters, Chinese are stingy, as well as the Malays and Indians being low laborers and Chinese being the boss, are problematic rhetoric that is cultivated, especially at the point in which you create businesses that allow for people to engage with. Ladies and gentlemen, we think we allow for experience for people to adopt and ensure that the economic framework of Malaysia right now isn't specifically targeted to specific races, but allow for integration beyond that and allow for the transformation that we want to see in Malaysia. Lastly, how do we make sure Malaysia can economically catch up to the likes of Singapore and Hong Kong? Right now, we are held back in our collective development because the entirety of the country, and because we have policies that does not allow for a consistent spread of development. Often development is sporadic and targeted in nature because the policy does not allow for us to cultivate an interest to all areas in society, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we see developments in areas like Kuala Lumpur, but not really in the East Coast area like in Kuantan, Temerloh, Rau, where I'm from, ladies and gentlemen. We think under this particular policy, it is a lot easier for the Malaysian government right now to abdicate their responsibility, especially when you have private schools like the Marlborough College, as well as the Prince of Wales International Schools coming in, looking like a lucrative economic development and investment, which leads to things like the Ministry of Trade and Finance and the Ministry of Education being at loggerheads as to whether or not we want to prioritize things like foreign direct investment, or do we want to prioritize education for our children on the ground. And oftentimes, the economic argument always wins because it is objectively stronger in comparison to protecting children, ladies and gentlemen. Thirdly, we think that at this point, it is very funny that the political elite that exists in this country right now don't send their kids to governmental schools, especially when the education policies that exist within those schools is a reflection of their government, ladies and gentlemen. What we do on our side is that we force the elite groups to want to change, to want to donate money, but also especially for them to set an example to the rakyat and say that our public schooling system can be a great thing, so we can inculcate change and the rakyat sees as an example. Lastly, we say we stop education from being politicized. Closing government loves the fact that the Sarawak Chief Minister right now wants to institute a policy that allows for English to be a priority and a main concern. We think we can better achieve that under the side of government I've never been prouder to propose.
All right, I thank the member of government for her speech. Can I now please invite the member of opposition? Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the fact that in this debate, from the start, from the opening houses as well as closing government, they only talked about the fact that whether we should consider Bahasa or English as a platform of education means that the homogenization of identities in Malaysia is very real. The fact that we didn't consider that maybe Chinese could be a platform of education as well. We didn't consider that Tamil should be a legitimate form or legitimate platform of education. Because when you homogenize identities, the identity that prevail is the identity of the majority in that country. And that identity destroys the identity of every other cultural individual in Malaysia. So the way in which I will extend this debate is to first build and then only deconstruct. We feel that the identities of every group, gender association, race or religion is important and very personal to every individual. It went through history of cultural struggles, faith challenges to be defined as they are today. How do they destroy that? Because homogenizing this identity and assuming that a singular system will be able to accommodate several different cultural expressions, gender expressions, as well as religious expressions, and every one of their unique needs and interests is naive at best. Because one extra class of Bible studies don't allow that Christian kid to feel that he achieved spiritual fulfillment while he's educating himself. No, thank you. One extra Chinese class also doesn't cater for a Chinese education system which that kid feels and prefer because it better coincides with his identity as a Chinese. At that point in time, the identity that prevails with the identity that the majority believes is the identity that we should adopt. For example, learning the Malay language or learning the English language or learning certain certain religion, right? Realize also in this debate that we didn't account for minority religion and only talked about the majority religion. Because even if they are able to account for diversity, if there is this one kid who is Jewish or a minority religion that's extremely diverse and very rare, it's unlikely that he will feel comfortable in a situation where he is in between people of different religion who might or might not respect his different cultural expressions. No, thank you. Why are schools then fundamental to address this identity? Because government can tell us that there are many other means of cultural expressions, things like churches, your Indian and Chinese society, Malay societies, and so on. The reason why most of those are so much worse is because government cannot incept or regulate or moderate these views and beliefs. So they are unable to redefine what these beliefs should be. That means that the only place where a Christian kid feels comfortable talking about or speaking about his or her religion is the church. And if that church happens to be homophobic or Islamophobic, then that means that that is the way they will forever define religion. However, a singular religious class with one religious teacher in the entire school doesn't give you enough legitimacy to redefine that religion for you, to tell you that that religion is not about bigotry, but about acceptance. But a religious school provides you, a convent, for example, provides you enough legitimacy and makes you believe that that is indeed representative of my cultural and religious expression, as opposed to that one token teacher who teach Christian across the weekend. So that means that that's the only place in which they trust their teachers to tell them that acceptance is the only way to go. So we think that schools are the only way we're able to forward these things. But furthermore, we think parents are also, no, thank you, important. Because parents will only legitimately believe that this school are good and should be believed if these schools inherently represent their cultural expression. That means that everything that the teachers say will be reversed when they go back if it is a homogenized school. For example, even if you were to preach integration at a homogenized school, your parents can go back and tell you that's wrong, that's propaganda. But if you preach integration at a vernacular school, they are more accepting of it because they realize their cultural expression or their interests are also represented. We think that that makes better integration. So we think we create integration on our side because integration doesn't come by sitting next to someone of a different race. It comes from the willingness to integrate. And you cannot expect citizens of Malaysia to be willing to integrate if you destroy their identity at every point. And you destroy their identity for particularly the most important person for them, their children. No, thank you. We think that only in schools where you're only able to unify when we think that underside government, they're only willing to accept that unification can happen when you suppress your differences and become similar to every other person. We don't believe that's integration. That's either forced integration or false integration because they don't accept your cultural differences. They just expect you to behave the same way, grow under the same system, and then be the same way. That's not integration or unification that we stand for. Closing.
How will Malaysia weather the global volatilities that exist right now at the point in which you don't try to engage in building up a one Malaysia identity as opposed to specific individual racial identity?
Look, we believe the building of identity that we are one Malaysia can exist while respecting cultural differences, while respecting cultural expression. We believe that the building of identity can happen and can coexist while realizing that schools are an important cultural expressions to many different people. Let's now deconstruct. The problem with opening government is that they don't realize that the breeding ground of misogyny, bigotry, and racism are not schools but extreme societies like certain churches or certain race societies that promote racism. That means that trying to fix that at a school level, trying to fix that by eliminating those schools isn't the problem. It's regulating those schools and ensure that bigotry don't grow is the real way we're able to deal with that. So if I'm a Muslim child and at school every day I unless I'm coincidentally friends with a Christian kid, that interaction isn't meaningful. That's why even in very, very integrated and diverse schools, you still have people who sit separately and don't want to interact with each other. Because not all interactions are positive interactions, and some interactions are necessarily negative. So we think that in order to ensure that every interaction is positive, you need to be able to tell them that their integration come at their own will, and they were willing to integrate, not that they were forced. So we also think that we agree that on principle that government with closing government, that government intervention can only come when it's bad. But we think this government intervention is particularly good. And most of the problem of closing government was one of a systematic problem. Things like whether or not we have more fundings for good schools across rural areas, or whether or not we should invest highly in our public education. We think those are mechanistic problems that are not exclusive to integration. We're extremely proud to oppose.
Audiences are reminded to not cheer too loudly as to disrupt the speaker's speech. All right. I thank the member of opposition for her speech, and then now please invite the government to it. Here.
Three questions are asked in this speech. One, how do we build the one Malaysia identity, and what is it really? Number two, how do we grow the anak of the rakyat? And number three, how do we improve the system and get the government to work together? First question on identity, dealing with everything that Jasmine talked about. And here I will posit, what is identity? Because in all our professional lives we have many roles. Jasmine is a dutiful Chinese daughter. She's also a working professional, and an economic life and a cultural life, the different masks and faces she puts on, depending on where she is, are necessarily different. Currently, there's an economic role that people have to play. You have to know what language to speak and where to work and where to get the jobs. We have to speak English for that. There's a cultural role we have to play. The language we speak at home is Chinese. The kind of values we adopt. And the idea right now is that the balance is now tipped almost 100% in favor of the cultural role and nothing in favor of the economic role. We advance the radical proposition that you need to earn money in a global economy to support your cultural lifestyle. It is perfectly possible for people to be sustainable economically, which is what Jay talked about, and also be good, beautiful when they go home to the culture and serve their parents and God in the way they see this. In fact, we will advance further that the current problem with Malaysia's education system is that people who are perceived as very strongly rooted in culture, unfortunately, are also heavily interlinked with a lack of economic opportunity and poverty. It's high time that closing government breaks the link, the supposed link, between people being culturally very sensitive and aware versus them being poor. You can be rich, you can be middle class, and you also can be culturally sensitive. It depends on how we train the Malaysian rakyat to change the mask they put on and to interact with a variety of situations, something you get only from outside of the house. Jasmine then says that schools are the only place we can talk about the religion, and therefore it's a safe space for them. Last I checked, I went to church to find God. So clearly, there's a place to talk to God in the quiet of the soul. But there's a place for you to learn. There's a place for you to love deeply in private, your bedroom, and a place to speak strongly in public. We recognize that the modern Malaysian has to go to many of these different places in his or her lifetime, and we offer you the opportunity by teaching you the common curriculum so that language unlocks all these potentials for you so you can wear many identities. She then argues that people are more willing to integrate when you respect their differences. How? You won't even see these people. What opening talked about is that parents will reject our policy by pulling these kids out of school or telling them to avoid that strange Chinese orang in the class next to them or sit separately. If this incentive structure doesn't change, then Jasmine's arguments all fall because OP has no reason why people will voluntarily integrate magically without being given an incentive to do so as they sit next to each other. So even if we do accept that people do sit separately right now, the thing about school is that, you know, you hate this guy who looks differently from you in Form 1, but over time, through repeated interactions, getting used to each other, you're like, hey, this guy not so bad after all, you may even date him. So that's the idea. We want to see a situation where people will overcome the initial backlash to learn that the person sitting next to them with a lighter colored skin is really not so different after all, because he's the same Malaysian, he has the same dreams and hopes. Opening.
It is possible for that to happen given that people don't spend all day in school and all day within co-curriculum classes. Would the formation of empathy be better with or without your parents putting in the extra effort to tell you don't interact.
Would the formation of empathy happen if you didn't see these people in school day in, day out and realize that the formative years of your movement and your growing up are crucial to you shaping your worldview? This brings me to my second point on the anak of the rakyat. Because what OO and CO both say is that the education of the individual is the most important. No, it's not. It's the education of the rakyat, the people as a whole, who's important for the future of Malaysia. That's what we care about as a priority. Their arguments were the following. Oh, parents will put their kids out of school. Then make education compulsory lah. Don't stop them. But the idea is this: people come to Malaysia for a lot more than just education. They come here for capital markets. They come here for industry growth. They come here because the food here is better than Singapore. So the idea is this: parents won't magically relocate because the kid can't go to school they want. There are many other reasons, and we're the only side that tells you this, that people stay in Malaysia. Give yourself some credit, you're a pretty good place. So they say that the parents will tell their kids to ignore people different from them. But here's the thing, like I talked about earlier, if you are working in the same project group for an SPM, you need your A1, you will learn to suck it up and work together. What we are doing of closing government is telling people to develop professionalism. You may not like him, you may not go out with him, but you will work with him. This goes to Jay's extension about how the Kopitiam Ekonomi is about realizing the potential of every Malaysian for working life later on, where you have to meet these people again and work with them even if you don't like them. And worst comes to worst in the school, if the person really ostracizes the police people, then the cikgu just really will hantam him lah. Okay, that's okay with that. So we think, and Gina talked about in speech, which is why we're winning this debate, that your children are not just your children. Your children are also the children of Malaysia. The principle of local parentis means that we do things like national service, like vaccines, because it's in the interest of the whole nation. The integration is an objective benefit. These are very important things. And we think the greatest crime or the potential of the future is to lock the child's potential into existing racist and provincial narratives that you are only the sound of Sejarah Melayu, you're only good enough to talk to people of your own race. We want to overcome this and make people realize that there's a greater future beyond what you've been taught, than what you've been born into. There's a future you can believe in. Third extension, how we improve the system. And over here we get this strange argument from opening that lobbying power by parents will only be used for richer interests. No lah. If you want to build a better science lab, is there a poor door and a rich door? No lah, the same door, right? This is not a door plaza, okay? So the idea is this: even at the teacher quality at TFM, what Jay talked about is that budget funding in government is given out per head. So if everyone in the system is in the same public school, the education ministry gets a lot more power to fight for more funds to hire more teachers from overseas. This automatically improves almost overnight. So closing government is the only side that gives you analysis. It isn't just about lobbying from the ground up. It is budgetary prioritization from the top down that we also affect on our side. And they argue that people in the rich class will lobby for different things that the poor can't use. But let's be frank, this is a comparative analysis. Versus them being in completely different schools to begin with, at least if you lobby for things like polo electives, the poor can still choose polo because these benefits are not exclusive. We think that this is a greater chance to be together and learn things, which is important. But Jay gives you a further extension, and which was never dealt with by closing, about how currently it is too easy for the government to just leave it to the private sector, leave it to Marlborough College, and just hope that the private sector will solve itself. That's not the point. We want a Malaysia where people and government leaders will send their children to public schools and say, my friends of the rakyat, put your kids here, this is worth coming to. It is only when the nation acts in one accord and moves together, when the kids sit side by side, hand by hand, shoulder to shoulder, that Malaysia will overcome the trappings of its past and move towards a more glorious future. I've never been prouder to propose.
I think the government wait for speech. Can I now please invite the opposition wing to sum up the debate?
National identity is the word that the government side keep on using without ever telling us
what is their definition of national identity. Because on the other side, we think that national identity is you embracing the major identity and you having to teach things like your interest in speaking in Chinese or your interest in being a Muslim, and you have to accept the culture, the prevalent culture that is existent, so that you can integrate within societies. And we think that is very abhorrent. So we think we have a problem with CJ rehashing a lot of what OG said, but I'm going to also engage with both sides, right? So let's talk about integration, right? Because integration doesn't really exist only in school, right? Because we have a lot of other things, even in the status quo. We have things like activities in MSSG or sport activities or platform that allows a lot of interaction. We have the kids in our schools go to other schools so that they are able to see other people, and they are able to go back to their safe haven so that their parents don't retaliate against that. So we think these are all the important factors that we have to consider within this debate. So we think we might not have as much interaction as that, but we don't see that how their forced interaction is a good one, as we tell you that what we have, even if we have less, we have better form of interaction, and we think that is very important. So let's talk about the issue in this debate. Firstly, let's talk about cultural identity and how you are supposed to only embrace one identity, right? Because now this debate is about the homogenization against the freedom of expression. Because we think that up until now, the identity of majority always prevails, right? So we think it's very harmful. That's the reason why we have people like the Native Americans who are up until now, they are hostile towards other people because they feel like the only way that they can integrate is to either embrace other identity or they have to ditch their own identity. So we have people who think that their identity is what makes them what they are. So these are people who would rather ditch the secular system that is inexisting and join and only live in their isolated people because they feel like their culture is even more important. So what happens under that side is that you are creating people with more of that mentality. You create people who feel like the secular is now going up against them, and that's the reason why they should live and they should teach their be within only in isolation. So we think these are very harmful mentality. Sit down, and we think that these are not what we wanted, right? So let's talk about parents, right? Because we think Jasmine talked a lot about parents, which have been conveniently ignored by CG. Because parents, they are only comfortable if their children are in a zone where they can control and they know what their children is up to. But if you as a religious parent know that the teacher is teaching your children secular things that you are against in, what happens is that whenever the child go back home, the parents will just revert back to whatever and tell the child that whatever your teacher is teaching you is wrong. So we think when parents adopt this particularly hostile conversation with the child, this is how the child will just resent whatever he's learning in school and think that this school is wrong and whatever I'm learning so is not a legitimate choice because it is not approved by the parents. So we think at the very least on our side, we can always preach even in vernacular schools or religious schools. And we think parents are more accepting because they know that that their children is still learning the core of the important thing that they want their children to learn, right? So we think on our side, we have parents who are less defensive, and that's how you are better able to preach and try to integrate these children. Sit down. Secondly, thirdly, on national identity, right? But their national identity comes at the cost of you ditching all the other identities, and we think that's particularly abhorrent because we think countries like Malaysia have always retained their national identity as a diverse society where everyone can live and express their own freedom of expression. We think national identity is a lot better when everyone feels that their differences is accommodated to rather than trying to live in a hostile country where you would say that your national identity is only if you can speak in Malay or English, and it is not a legitimate choice at all if you try to speak in other language or if you try to embrace your own cultural identity. So we think a state that is actively going hostile towards its own people are a state where people have further hostile discussions on how they can make their own identity legitimate. So what happens is that people grow further apart because now the discussion become about how you want to make their identity legitimate rather than how you can come together in the end. And because of that, we think it's very harmful. Sit down. So we think national identity is a lot better if they feel like they are also part of the country, they are also something important that the country is accommodating, and that's the reason why they will try to partake in whatever discussion that the country is having because they feel like they can also retain their own identity, and so we think that's how national identity is a lot better on our side. Sit down. And thirdly, and on the idea of unity and interaction, right? Because we think that there is a flawed case where they never tell us on why physical proximity is suddenly equals to integration. Because we think when you are, even if you are physically close and in physical proximity, and if you're conveniently ignoring the other parties because you feel that this person are below you, we think it's still harmful in that sense, right? Especially when the government side have conveniently ignored things like sensitivity to race or language or religion and only want to talk about poverty, we think that they have a one-sided case that is very harmful. So let's talk about why people choose this school, right? People choose this sort of school because they prefer if their children associate within certain circles and they feel better if that happens. And so the thing about unity is that it's very subjective. People feel that they can unite better if they are able to retain their identities, and that if they feel like that, then we should facilitate this choice. But before that,
We can mitigate your personal discomfort by you being able to practice at home or providing you some options at school. But why will you put that discomfort above everything else when you don't know whether it's genuine discomfort or born out of bigotry?
but that's not enough, right? You're only telling these people that you can only be a proper Muslim if you are at home. Because the government doesn't think that your choice is a legitimate choice and you should not actively or in public practice it, and we think that is a bigoted view from Mitzvah, right? So we think now what they are doing is that they are assuming all integrations are good ones. And we think that is not necessarily true. Why? And why? Because we don't think they are creating a conducive environment at all to kickstart a conversation. Because now these children will only generate a conversation in the views that they grow up with. And if their parents are racist or sexist, they will just perpetuate this view to the other children. So that's the reason why in France, where there are a prevalent problem of Islamophobia, children become depressed. They become suicidal because they fear of going to school because children bully them or merely ignore them. So at the very least, under our